Greetings adventurers and welcome to the Loot Goblin Marketplace. Today's treasures are very special because they're all community submitted. You see, over all the platforms I do, YouTube, TikTok, Discord, I get a lot of stories thrown my way between the Ask Credits and the horror stories. I figured this week would be perfect to kick off our first exclusive RPG horror stories submitted by you guys. And I actually have a special treat because if you're not in this video, there's a chance that you'll be in my next video coming up soon that's a collab with me, Crow's Nest, and Critical Kunik. So I'm really excited about that. And as soon as that is edited, I'll be posting that, hopefully as soon as next week. Alright, let's jump into this first story. This one was submitted on YouTube recently by Zachary, and it doesn't have a name, so I'm going to be calling it DM Doesn't Like Tragic Backstories. A dungeon master removed me from the group because I had a sad backstory. I never brought it up in game unless it was for role-playing character interaction with his brother who shared the backstory. And I okayed the backstory with the DM to fit in with the story of the campaign. I forgot to mention he was a recovering alcoholic and couldn't go into bars, and he found a solution for that very quickly and everyone in the group was fine with it. There was another two players who had two characters with even sadder backstories. And he would say stuff like, oh, I hope my character's PTSD gets triggered, like an effing sociopath, and yet I'm the one who got kicked out. He also said I was making other players uncomfortable. I reached out and they all said that they were confused why I left, and my dungeon master was using favoritism for the guy who had the two sad characters, who constantly talked about their trauma and that I wasn't making anyone uncomfortable. The only person I made uncomfortable was said guy, and it was because I flirted with this character once and then never again because he said he didn't like it. He was also upset that I was getting better rolls than him and would glare at me when I get good rolls, and yet the dungeon master said that I would get too angry for getting bad rolls and not take the breaks he offered. If I did take the breaks, he probably would have said I was being childish and putting the entire game on pause because I was overreacting, even though there was only one time where I got really upset because I wasn't able to hit anything for 3 sessions in a row. TLDR, I got kicked out because of favoritism for someone who was actively worse than me and made the entire group uncomfortable. So first of all, Zachary, thank you for sharing the story. There's a couple things that kind of jumped to mind immediately that confused me. One, you said they had 2 characters. And that right there, I mean, you called favoritism right on the spot if he's getting 2 characters that are allowed to do stuff that other players get criticized for. When it comes to roles, I know it sucks. Like, it seems like you understand that you're a little upset, but I get why, because 3 sessions in a row not hitting anything's pretty unlucky. That being said, it doesn't seem like it really was a big deal. If the rest of the party agrees, then it's just the DM and the player. Sometimes it is just the luck of the draw where you have a dungeon master who's abusing their power and you have a player that's capitalizing on it. I hope this can get resolved in a way where you get to play with these other players because it seems like you were having fun before that. I actually like the idea of you having a character with limitations. The idea of him being a recovering addict and not going into the tavern, but, you know, finding a way to roleplay it, finding a way to make it so that he's not a detriment to the party. Like, for example, I'm sure if it was an important plot hook, you would find a way to integrate yourself into that story, or you'd come in to defend the party if there was combat in the tavern. But for roleplay reasons during downtime, you want to avoid it. I think that's actually pretty interesting of a dynamic because, you know, every adventurer wants to go to the tavern, and you kind of throw a curveball there and have like a very interesting RP reason why you wouldn't default there all the time. Overall, I think it's an interesting story, and I do believe it is important to remember that sometimes the DM will play favorites, and you might find yourself out of a group for no particularly good reason, but it's just going to make the group that sticks that much better. The second RPG horror story is by someone whose handle is 1003 Justin Law, and I'm going to call this story Mr. Uchiha, Please Calm Down. It reads, a big Naruto fan came into the game with Sasuke Uchiha as his character. Now as an anime fan myself, I knew the gist of the character and thought it was just a character based on the anime character. Nope. Turns out the character is Sasuke, as he is at age 27, with the Mangenko Sharingan and the Running Gun already unlocked and everything. Oh, and did I mention this was supposed to be a level 1 rogue? Cue intense debate over why this is not allowed, which ended in this guy doing an actual table flip and storming out. Not the end of the story, by the way, because he came back next session apparently having done his research and decided against whatever he was doing the week before and engaged in a long conversation with me on how he can, eventually, get his character to unlock all of Sasuke's abilities by endgame. I eventually created an entirely new mechanic for him that was honestly a bit railroady, but he was perfectly fine with that. Let me just start off by saying I'm glad that this story has a peaceful resolution. Now he's playing the carbon copy of Sasuke, which some people might consider a little bit cringy, but honestly, players are really new or they really like a piece of media. they kind of want to live through and experience the same payoff that the character did, because it makes a really cool story. I mean, who wouldn't want to be the main character in their favorite franchise? Now, obviously, he expected too much too early. It's basically the equivalent of, in the tutorial, you get all the maxed out stats and endgame weapons, and you just completely steamroll everything. Obviously, the DM isn't going to let you do this, but the player got angry and did a literal table flip, which is hilarious. But then after a day of cooling off, he kind of realizes where he went wrong. He comes back, and what I really like is you guys create a system where he can relive some of those moments he wanted from the Sasuke character. So I've experienced something similar where someone wanted to play an anime protagonist, and you can do a couple things. It sounds like here he did a little bit of homebrew. He says it's railroady, but honestly, if it's a template or a progression system that matches Sasuke's character sheet entirely, and both parties are happy, I'm not going to call it railroading, I'm just going to call it good planning. So let's say, for example, you find yourself in a situation where someone wants to play a cliche anime character like Goku. Now, they could come with you with a sane homebrew that makes him look so overpowered and he has all these ki blasts and he can do a ton of damage level 1, or you can sit down with the guy and say, listen, I think you want to play a combination of like a monk and a barbarian. Goku has forms, we can make those forms rages. Here's the power level of each rage. When you hit certain levels, you do certain upgrades, maybe even put in certain feats. It will reflect what you see in the show. And you will have those cool moments. It's not going to be exactly like the show, but you're going to be able to do some of the things you've seen in the show in a new way. And I feel like a lot of the time that's what the character wants, that's what the player wants, and it's just a great compromise. And it seems like you guys are already doing that, so I commend you. And I hope the player, even though he started out as a bit of a horror story, table flip included, and both of you guys got a great session out of it and a great campaign. Alright, let's go on to the next story. This one was on my Discord. It's a bit of a longer one. It's by someone named Chicken Dash, and they've been pretty active in the community. This one's called Selfish Player Wasted a Year of Everyone's Time and Caused Anxiety Attacks with Me. So we added this player to the group after he was excluded from the community for some drama-related nonsense, and I felt like he could use a bit of social interaction to help him cope. I taught many players how to play the game over the many years I GM'd, so no problem there. First, a bit about me. I've been GMing homebrew campaigns for many years and taught over 20 people how to play. The chicken campaigns are usually quite popular, and I only let people join after someone leaves, as there's plenty of people waiting to be able to join my games. We set up a basic character. I want to play something with a bit of magic and ranged weapons. Well, I got a really cool artificial crossbow master build that I wanted someone to playtest, so I pitched the idea. That was the first character of our self-proclaimed actor, chef, writer, and artist. For someone who claims to have written so many fantasy stories with the assistance of not just me, but two friendly players, which I've referred to as Miss and Sharko, they are married, for future reference, our problem player, let's call him Gonzo, had a decent background story. The character and how he played it very quickly fell flat, but alas, he wasn't a team player to begin with, and got himself isolated and killed in an encounter. Well, he wanted to do the next character on his own, the one we'll lovingly call Sashimi Sushi Man, a Drake Warden Ranger, Coolio. Well, Gonzo refused to accept that his Drake was not a fully grown dragon or even a baby dragon, and Sashimi had literally zero interactions with the party. So much so that he more often than not started just brooding in the corner while he was role-playing the Drake as the most annoying thing ever, singing annoying songs, dancing, etc. Not that big of a deal, right? Yeah, it was a very emotional moment, one of the players finding the heirloom ring of his father, which would allow him to come back to his father and brother after they ventured to live with them on their farm, no longer dishonored by his own failures. Oh, and the dragon almost angered a tribe into killing the group, a hostile tribe, and the dragon starts singing over the chieftain's words. Bam. Insert weird noises constantly while other players talk, and completely irrelevant stuff. Well, guess what? This character died because he ran away from the group into the loving arms of a frost giant and his club. The third story, well, that was a different story. An Ganassi, Drunken Fist monk, with the most confusing backstory. Gonzo didn't send it to me because he said he had a good story and wanted me to experience it. Okay, I had that before, I don't mind as long as the players don't expect me to have plot hooks ready for them. Well, the story goes as follows. He grew up among humans and had never seen an Ganassi. He was the detective. He followed the trail of an arcane mishap into Icewind Dale and wanted to find the source of the problem. Fine enough, but he never stopped retconning and expanding on it to make the character look cool. Suddenly he grew up among Ganassi, then suddenly he just read about them. Oh, and then he grew up among humans again, but for no reason knows the culture of the Ganassi. He had a wife, no, it's his daughter, nope, he had 3 sons at home. Now his wife or daughter was his partner who was actually a serial killer that killed evil people, back to being his daughter, oh back to my wife, so on and so forth. So everything was inconsistent. Well, he couldn't start being a team player again and got killed by a white dragon after abandoning the group on turn 1. He died and then got brought back to life. I honestly just don't want to go through character creation with him again. You'll see why later. Yada yada yada, no one trusted his character at all anymore. He was a lying coward that would constantly make remarks about how strong and smart he was, but refuses to ever assist his allies. So one player, the Red, finds out that her loved ones had been turned undead and is forced to fight against them. She'd even chosen between saving her current lover and risking her dying or Gonzo. She chose the player character over the non-player character. Well, Gonzo didn't join the fight and almost got the group killed again. The Red regretted that choice of saving him over the NPC very quickly, but Gonzo couldn't help but make remarks about how great he was. The Red character snaps at him and tells him to shut up and sleep in the camp. His actions after being basically called a worthless liar, I removed my tattoos and now everyone has to forgive me. And he was really upset when nobody cared that he washed off a bit of paint off his face. It was the cut my hair to be a new character anime trope. Another thing was that any interaction with his character was forced by him, meaning two characters having a heart-to-heart or private discussion, he always had to jump in and instantly turn any discussion to be about how great and awesome he was. Oh, and if his character wasn't physically near something to interrupt it, he became very angry at the group and started yelling and groaning. We call these moves Gonzo moves in the group. Or if someone does something very selfish, we say don't do a Gonzo. Well, his out-of-game behavior was the real problem. We are a very constructive group. My players are encouraged to tell me if the game feels off, balance, roleplay, etc. And we help each other constantly to create a better game. Usually there's an hour in the month we just chat about these things, no problem. Well, Gonzo took it a bit further. We had weekly, sometimes daily, 4 to 5 hour talks just about his character, and most of them were just about him explaining what his class even did on a functional level. He was already playing for a year at this point. Oh, and then he proceeds to forget all his class features before the next session started. We play on a weekly basis. Oh, and those tangents went into the game as well. Later on, my characters all admitted that when they heard his bousting, people were grabbing books, gaming consoles, or drawing tablets not to have to listen to another nonsensical story. In the aftermath, I wish I had done the same or pulled the plug earlier. The stories never went anywhere. Gonzo also constantly called and texted Miss and Sharko. Gonzo's American, Miss and Sharko are English. So he called them in the middle of the night for something that was literally in the player's handbook under his class feature list. Miss eventually snapped at him, and we had another 6 hours discussion about Gonzo's character. Well, he went back to his old ways immediately, and we had a group vote if anyone would want him to stay. Nobody said yes out of the 6 people, so we wrote a big paragraph explaining that he needs to work on the way he treats others and tips on where to start improving as a player, and that we'd be willing to take him back should he be willing to change. Well, he instantly resorted to insulting me and Sharko, and the kick was a permanent ban. Afterwards, I felt how much stress left my body. I was never so stressed running D&D, and I've never been that stressed since. Lesson: if somebody refuses to be a team player, be it in-game or out-of-game, constantly lies about achievements in life, and treats nobody with respect, as everything anyone gives is obviously their right to have, they might not be a good person to have around. Oh, and the upside? I got an old friend of mine into the group and he's awesome, and we were having a lot of very relaxed fun. Oh, but since all his characters are basically just badly copy-pasted anime ideas, we call these kinds of players now anime protagonists, and have a bit of a running joke of, too much anime ruins creativity. Not to talk bad about anime, I don't watch it, so no judgment there. So I actually like the lesson that you have at the end of this story. It's very clear that you're an experienced GM, and that a lot of the players are able to be open and honest with you about what happened. And obviously when the vote was 6-0, it's very clear who's in the wrong there. I feel like you're almost a little too nice, keeping the door open, kind of giving him a list of things to improve, because as the problem player, he just immediately lashed out like he had every other time he tried to do constructive criticism, but it was a nice thought to try. I did kind of have a random thought, because this was something I experienced myself. If a player constantly asks in detail what their character can do, and they seem to kind of dismiss it at the end of each conversation, it's partially because they're either trying to min-max and finding an exploit, and when what you tell them is kind of underwhelming, or they read it as something broken and you gave them the much more balanced reading of it, their busted idea kind of is thrown out the window and they kind of throw the baby out with the bathwater. All the knowledge essentially just goes away, because they don't want balanced knowledge. They want something broken that you can tell them. I like that you had a character ready to playtest if they wanted to, but you also didn't force them to play characters, because it seems like that seems to be a problem every once in a while, that DMs will be very excited about an idea and kind of thrust it upon people. But this seemed very natural, and you didn't keep doing that to them. In fact, you let them play their same characters over and over again, even after they died, because the problem wasn't the characters, it was the player. I'm sorry that this situation happened to you, but it seems that you're better off now and you're in a much better group, and you have a pretty good insight going forward that if a player ever makes you feel like this again, you kind of know what the problem is and how to resolve it, which is a good takeaway. Thank you everyone for your stories. Please keep sharing these on Discord, YouTube, kind of wherever you can reach out to me. I like reading them, and I will do more community-focused ones in the future. Thanks for stopping by. Make sure to like and subscribe and share the video to your friends. We hope to see you in the next one. Farewell for now.